Thanks. I am very happy to be here. So, this first slide is actually one of the most important slides in the whole deck. It's actually very subtly passive-aggressive, this slide. Does anybody know what's wrong with this slide? Anybody? The spelling of organization, is that? No? Aha. Yeah, I'm not big on the flash. Yes, but the point I was trying to make, let me just do that and then I'll get on to doing that. The point I was trying to make was around the spelling of the word organization. Some people would say that this word is misspelled. You have it right here, right? So this is the correct spelling of organization. And the reason it's written up there is so that I have a good way of telling you all that I'm Canadian and not American, which is very important. And I'm essentially required by Canadian law to make sure that you know that, because I don't want any of you to leave here with a misimpression. So we've covered that, yeah? Everybody's on board. Excellent. So I don't have a lot of time to spend convincing you that I have any idea what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to tell you about all the stuff I've done and the places I've been and what have you. If you want to know about that, you can read on my website. But, I mean, you do need to have some feeling that I know what I'm talking about. So we're just going to make a simple agreement for the purposes of this talk. 2 agreements, actually. One, we're all just going to agree that I'm awesome. Yeah? Excellent. And the second, thank you. The second agreement we're going to make is that I'm obscenely well qualified to speak on this subject. Everybody's on board. Excellent. I will tell you one thing about myself, because it's my proudest accomplishment. It's this group called Scrum Bears. I was one of the 4 founding members of a group called Scrum Bears about 6 or 7 years ago. We started out, we were 4 friends getting drunk and complaining about our jobs. We are now 750 members in Gothenburg, the city where I live. And we've spread to 3 more countries in addition to that, and we have a few more chapters in other countries. It's an open brand. You can start one yourself if you want. We have some, like, logos, and we have a website and all that kind of stuff. If anybody's interested, I do ask that you invite me, as I've been to the opening of every Scrum Bears that's ever happened. So if you want to start one, please do that. So that's my proudest accomplishment. I'd just like to touch on that. So, visualize flow. I started out with a little bit of a user story, just so we can make sure that you guys are in the right talk, basically. As an Agile Eastern Europe participant, I want to improve transparency in my organization so we can get better insight into status, improve our planning, and improve our deployment process. What problem am I trying to alleviate? Don't bother reading this. We're going to do a little bit of a hand thing here. How many of you are asked when something's going to be ready and you don't even know what it is? Huh? Quite a few. Okay. How many of you recognize this? Your sprint plannings are long. They're hot. It smells bad in the room. And at the end of the planning, everybody agrees to the sprint just to get out of the room. Huh? Okay, you're in the right talk. How many of you end up saying that something is done only to find out that it never made it to production? Good, so we're in the right talk. So this is about alleviating some of those symptoms. What I'm not trying to accomplish here is I am not giving you a defined process. I'm going to give you a starting process, a sort of template to get you going, but this is not, don't go back and say, Jeff said I have to do exactly these things. This is just an idea to get you thinking about it and get you moving. So not a set of defined steps and not a perfect process. So the first thing is visualizing what I call our inflows. We have this strange thing. All of our work starts in a backlog. Work doesn't actually start in a backlog. It starts at the moment of request. It starts when somebody asks you for something. So the first thing I like to do is I like to visualize the inflows from different places. Inflows can be your stakeholders. They can be things like bugs. Basically, where does work come from? I like to visualize these separately because then it allows stakeholders and such to prioritize their own stuff. But then we start to move it into what I call the backlog, or what's called the backlog. So I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, but people have this tendency to think their thing is the most important thing. Fair enough, that's their job. They're supposed to think their thing is the most important thing. That's what they're there to represent their thing. But the good thing about visualizing it is so they can figure out what their most important thing is. And then as they move them together, they have to see and understand that other people have important things as well. So that's visualizing the inflow. So instead of all your work starting in a backlog, figure out where it comes from first and then move it into a backlog. Right. I'm going to go back for half a second. Maybe you guys have seen this before, I don't know. Has anybody ever noticed that people don't know exactly what they want? Anybody? Yeah. Or they think they know exactly what they want, but you don't understand what they're asking for? Huh? Yeah. Okay, so a backlog is not ready to be worked on. It's half the time this stuff is full of one-liners that somebody shouted out at a meeting, and somebody said, yeah, that sounds awesome, and they wrote it down. Nobody knows what it is. There's a refinement process that has to take place. Grooming, a lot of people call it. I like to visualize this process. I like to show where in the refinement we are, what's happening. So here's a simple one to get you going. We have a backlog. We have a product owner refinement and a team refinement. This is sort of an iterative loop where things go back and forth and back and forth. You go to your planning meeting, you ask, or you go to your refinement or grooming meeting, you ask a few questions, the product owner says, oh, I don't really know about that, I'll go and find out, we keep it here. Then he comes back with some answers, and then he or she, also has some questions. So then you guys got to go and figure some stuff out. Maybe you call it doing a spike, maybe you call it research, whatever it is. Team's got to do some refinement. We got to sort of iterate through this thing until eventually the work actually makes sense and people understand it. Then we move it into ready. Probably a lot of you have heard of definition of ready. I visualize when things are ready so that you can see stuff that's ready just to be pulled from the top of the backlog. Definition of ready, I'm going to go through this really quick. Having a conversation about definition of ready is a very, very important thing. If you don't have a definition of ready, you should start having a conversation about it now. But I'll give you a quick template to kind of get you started. User story, we all know this one. Have you ever noticed user stories that don't completely tell us what we're supposed to build? Has anybody noticed that? Yeah, you can stop doing the hands. We're good for now. I'll put my hand up when I want to see your hands. But user stories are good. They add some value. Value and impact. What is the value or the impact we're trying to do? And much, much more importantly than that, how are we going to measure that we have achieved that afterwards? These are something I like to have at the top of every single item I have in my backlog. Stakeholders, I like to write invite to the review meeting. Who are the stakeholders? Who wants this? Which column did it come from? Acceptance criteria, things that it must have, things that it won't have. If you don't list what stuff won't have, then it could really be anything, right? Question and answers, you don't necessarily have to use this. Sometimes I like to keep track of the conversation. That depends a little bit on your context. I don't always use this. If you have really tight collaboration, you can skip this. Actions pending. What is the PO going to find out before the next time we meet? What is the team going to find out before the next time we meet? Let's write that stuff down so that we actually have a list of actions. Acceptance tests, how will we confirm it works? How to demo, not just how to demo it, like what you're going to show, but if you don't have a regularly set up environment, where are you going to demo this thing? That's something I like to talk about early. That's just a quick intro to definition of ready. And basically, you go through this loop, looking through this template, sort of checking things off until it's ready and move it over. You don't have to check everything off in this. The only reason for having this is to make an active decision if you're not going to do something, so that you don't just forget about it. If I decide that a list of stakeholders is not needed for this, that's perfectly fine. But at least then I made that decision. It wasn't just that I forgot to think about it. So then you have ready. And that's where this is what we usually think of as a backlog, where a team can just pull stuff off the top of it. Ready, then we have a sprint, or whatever it might be. You could call this team, the people that are doing the actual production of the thing being asked for. And they just pull stuff into here. The outflow, we're very, very bad at visualizing the outflow, what happens after our team is done with it. We think that when we're done with it, it's always done. How many people have an ops team that does their deployments for them? Frightening amount. How many have a staging environment where they put stuff? Excellent. Whew. Visualize the outflow. After it goes to done on your Scrum board, where does it go after that? Does it go into a staging environment? If you have a team who's doing your deployments, I'm going to wager a guess that there's a backlog there, that stuff isn't getting to production as quickly as you might like. I won't make people put their hands up. Awaiting deployment is an excellent column for visualizing that. You will be amazed how fast things start to change around your deployment process when your stakeholders can see their thing is done, but they can't have it yet. You'll start to make very good progress like that. So yeah, just visualize what happens after your team. And then you put it all together, because this is all part of one big process. Yeah, I have to take it in chunks, because otherwise you can't read it, right? But this is part of one big process. Now that we've looked at it and we've understood it and we put it all together, I can follow something as it flows throughout my entire organization. I can see where the thing I requested is, what kind of status it's in, who's working on it, if they're working on it. I can follow value as it flows through my whole organization. It's quite straightforward. This is also excellent because it's recursive. Sprint. This is a team Scrum board that takes place inside the sprint. People often confuse visibility with transparency. If you threw your whole Scrum board up on a wall in the company, how many people would understand it? Not many, right? It does no good to have information available if the people looking at it can't interpret it. That's not useful to us. Nor does it matter to your stakeholders over here specifically what task you're doing. They're concerned about their story or the feature that they asked for or whatever that thing is. They don't need to know every single minute detail of it. They're just concerned with the whole of the thing. So you can have some recursion here. You break this out and it becomes the team Scrum board has a process that takes place under that. Same thing for, product owner. What if they have a specific process they're following to get to definition of ready? This is really easy because we have simple abstractions. We can see where teams are, and then they can do whatever they need to do inside of that. And we don't need to worry about that. We're just worried about our thing. So all this seems really easy and great, right? Yeah. Okay, so, what? That's not right. Oh, no, it is. We're cool. So I wanted to give you some actionable takeaways from this. I want you to be able to go back to your work on Monday. I guess most of you will go back on Monday, and have specific things that you can do when you get there. I'm all about things being actionable. So, visualize the inflow into your teams. Step one, where does work come from? Who are my stakeholders? How does work come to be? Visualize the refinement process. Items do not just appear ready to work on. There is work involved in getting them to that status. Put aside some time to refine. If you guys aren't doing refinement of any kind, which is unfortunately very common, just put aside a little bit of time to look at the backlog items before you get into sprint planning. Because the problem I see all the time is you get into the planning of the thing, and it's not clear, but it's still the highest priority, so you got to pull it in anyway, and you have no idea what the thing is. Just put aside a little bit of time to ask the questions before you need the answers. Talk about what ready means for your team. Very important discussion. What do we need or don't need for us to consider an item to be ready? And visualize the outflow from your teams. Figure out what happens after you and try to show that in some way. So, all this seems really easy and great. I'm going to repeat that now. But I haven't told you about the secret sauce of this yet. You can actually do everything I just told you here, and this can fail horribly. Because there's a secret to this that most people miss. This is only a tool to enable discussions in your organization. If you are using this to never speak to each other, it's not going to work. If you are using this to ping each other in Jira tickets, this is not going to work. This is about facilitating conversations within your organization so that people can look at something and they can physically point at it and they can say, that thing, what's up with that thing? You need to speak to each other or this is never going to work. You can read a little bit more about this in my book. I brought a few paper copies with me. Unfortunately, the paper copies aren't actually available to order yet, so LeanPub is the only place to get the digital copy. But it's a pay-what-you-like model, so it's free. The book's also open source, so it's on GitHub, so you can do pull requests, great for correcting my grammar and these sort of things. Please don't try to change the spelling of the word organization. I reject those pull requests every single time. It happens a lot. It's spelled correctly. Yeah, so it's got a continuous delivery pipeline to LeanPub. So the moment you make a pull request and I accept it, it's in the book 5 minutes later. Right, so I need to run some acceptance criteria to make sure that this talk actually did what I hoped it was going to do. So what I said it was going to do was provide a basic structure, provide some actionable takeaways, and what I said it wouldn't do was fix all your problems overnight. This is not a defined process. This is about trying to figure out how things work and having those conversations. So I have some acceptance tests I need to run. Thumbs up from everybody who got an actionable takeaway. Oh, that's close to 50%. I might not have quite hit my goal there. That's all right. People tell Jeff later over beer that they enjoyed the talk. So I can't actually measure that one right now, but I'll be measuring it throughout the night, and my goal is 3 people there. And then the final acceptance criteria is audience applause.